I've been talking about these parents who are standing up against critical race theory, and all critical theory is simply socialism, leftism, tyranny in disguise. That's all it is, because they criticize, but they leave out what is kept silent in the criticism is, oh yes, and we're going to replace this with more government, more powerful government, more government control of your money, your resources, your gasoline, all of that stuff. But the parents are still standing up against teaching critical race theory in the schools. Here's a new viral video. This guy, Ian Rice, who stood up before a school board in Michigan. And just if you're not watching, he's a black guy. Cut 6.
Critical race theory is teaching that white people are bad. That's not true. That would teach my daughter that her mother is evil. You already have an educator within your staff that has pulled my daughter aside and said, well, you're a minority, so you know better than to engage in certain things.
Wow.
Whoa.
When I was brought to the school's attention, nothing happened to the educator. Instead, my daughter was brought in, and she was ridiculed. So my question is now, with critical race theory being brought in, what is your criteria to educate the educators? And who are you to educate my children, or any of our children, in life issues? That's our job.
Yes.
Your job is to teach them math and science. Our job is to teach them about life.
Yeah, see, that hits the nail right on the head. And all these people saying, oh, these parents don't understand. They don't understand. Well, he sounds to me like he understands plenty. He's got it exactly right. But the thing is, the woke empire, when I say they're striking back, it's really true. The nation's largest teachers union, National Education Association, has resolved it will teach CRT in every state of the union, which would be defying laws that are now in place in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Iowa, Idaho, and Texas, and defying parents who are recalling the school boards who are insisting they teach that stuff. And also, and I'm reading this off National Review, also NEA will research the organizations attacking educators doing anti-racist work and or use the research already done and put together a list of resources and recommendations. In other words, they're going to come after you. They're going to try and intimidate people into standing down so they take control over teaching your children's values. By the way, they had to take this down off their website because wickedness doesn't like to be exposed to the light. But if there's any question about what they're really teaching, because they keep saying, oh no, it's not what you think. You don't understand what we're just teaching, the slavery. We're just teaching history. It's just history we're teaching. Here is, I think his name is Glaude. He pronounces it Glaude. It's Eddie Glaude. He's a Princeton professor who's often on MSNBC, on Morning Joe. And our pal Chris Rufo was on explaining why critical race theory was so bad. And here is Glaude's reaction. He gets very, very upset about this. This is what he says we have to teach. It's cut 8.
We're going to make mistakes. There are going to be extremes. There are going to be moments of overreach. I grant that. But part of what we have to do in this moment, Joe, and we've talked about this, is to confront the ugliness of who we are. And part of what I hear in these sorts of arguments is this sense in which that confrontation must be one where we're comfortable, where we feel good about who we are after we confront it. So in some ways, I'm scooting up in my chair, Joe, because I'm getting upset. Because we're seeing right now in real time a reassertion of the lie. The very thing that keeps us from becoming a different America, because we don't want to accept who we are.
The ugliness of who we are, Now, here's the thing. If there had been no England, if there had been no United States, if there had been no Declaration and no Constitution, Glaude wouldn't even know we were ugly. We're ugly compared to our ideals, our perfections. Of course we are. But how beautiful that out of our ugliness, we brought these ideas forward that make us seem ugly to him. Nowhere else on earth, no other time on earth would we be ugly. Any other time on earth, people would sit in awe at what we've done, And I'm going to later in the show, I'm going to talk about one of the greatest short stories written in America, which really explains this, really puts this in a very beautiful and moving way. But he wouldn't know we were ugly if it weren't for these ideas that were created out of our flaws, out of our sinfulness, out of our crazy, bloody history that is all of humankind's history. And the thing that this parent, Mr. Rice, the parent, was saying is the point. Who are these people? Who are these people to teach our children values? What have they done that's so good? Where does their sainthood come from? Where does their moral standing come from that they want to take away from parents the right to teach? You know, they talk about sex education all the time. Well, you know, I can understand you want to teach children where babies come from, okay? But what special wisdom gives teachers or any of these people the right to teach sexual values that parents oppose? Or Hollywood. You know, and Breitbart.com had a story. The increase of LGBTQ characters and themes popping up in TV shows made for children in the last decade is not an organic development. It's the consequence of so-called queer creators pushing the LGBTQ agenda and working with major entertainment networks, writers, producers, showrunners, and directors to place sexualized themes into on-screen fare made for young audiences. A recent extensive report by Entertainment Insider highlights the increase of LGBTQ messaging in children's programming. They're doing it on purpose. What right do they have to take from children, to take from parents, the right to teach children their values, even if those values aren't your values? You know, the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir put out a video that went viral singing a song about how, yes, in fact, we are coming after your children. It's cut 5.
You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. You can keep them from disco, warn about San Francisco. Make him wear pleated pants, we don't care. We'll convert your children. We'll make them tolerant and fair.
So, of course, we're all for tolerance and fairness, but some of us have different ideas about how people should behave and what constitutes a moral sexual relationship and what constitutes an immoral sexual relationship. And as you know, I'm pretty libertarian about all this, but I understand the arguments of people who are not libertarian and have the right to pass those views on to their children without these creeps. And you know, this guy, he really does come across as creepy, by the way, as that demonic smile you see in people who are really bad guys. I don't know him. I'm not saying anything about him personally. I'm just looking at his face. But what standing do they have? What is it? What genius, of moral genius, do these people have that should replace the ideas of parents in their children's lives? Children will grow up, they will see the world, they will make decisions for themselves ultimately, and that is right. And these people have a right to make the arguments to adults. But children are, in fact, the charges of their parents. And it's parents who should be teaching these things. And when I look at the teachers union, you know, something like 57%, I can't remember the exact number, of Americans don't read very well. We have public education in this country for everybody, and they don't read very well, and they're teaching them about, you know, being gay or being anti-white or whatever they're teaching. Why not teach them to read? You know, it sounds like you got your work cut out for you. And the funny thing about this is so many of the ideas they have are so dumb. You know, this transgender agenda thing is all based on Michel Foucault's faux history of sexual distinction, that it was an invention, that sexual distinction, the difference between men and women, was an invention. You know, and Foucault was a gay sadomasochist who chased after children, apparently. He's been accused of having chased after children. And where again does his philosophy, where are the facts in his philosophy? I've read Michel Foucault, I've read quite a lot of him actually, and he's difficult to understand, he's maundering, but he makes all these assertions. Again, here is a guy on TikTok who is actually echoing Foucault, but this is what it devolves into, and these are the guys who think that they have the moral standing to explain sexual morality to your kids. And I'm sorry, they just don't. I love this guy because he's so nuts. He's explaining the gender binary, which means the difference between men and women.
The gender binary is a racist cultural construction created by white scientists in the 19th century as a means of showing the supposed superiority of Western civilization at being the only culture able to uphold sexual dichotomy. During the era of European colonialism, Europeans noticed that cultures around the world had sexual and gender diversity as an integrated part of society. 19th century race scientists saw sexual ambiguity as a sign of primitivity and believed that the binary distinction between the sexes gets more pronounced as a culture becomes more civilized. This racist interpretation of evolutionary theory was used as a means to solidify the binary gender and sex systems within Europe and European colonies.
Well, this is completely untrue, by the way. Most primitive societies have very little, if any, homosexuality. But I can't help but point out that an absolutely brilliant satirist, 6 years before that guy existed, imitated him, made fun of him 6 years earlier. Here he is, the great, he's impossible to imitate, so I'll just put him on. Gender theorists today believe that the different behaviors and capabilities of men and women are not a reflection of their natural propensities and desires, but were imposed on them by the gender stereotypes of society, which were created at the Conference of the Gender Stereotype Society, held in 1817 at a secluded chateau on the shores of Lake Geneva. It was there that it was determined by secret ballot that from now on, men would be able to invent things and lie convincingly about their sexual conquests, while women would talk a lot about clothes and then make dinner. These oppressive and confining stereotypes were imposed on the population of the entire globe through repeated exposure to televised football and the movie Cinderella, as well as Archie comics dropped from planes on primitive villages, where up to that point, people had been living lives of complete gender equality. I love that guy. He's hilarious. Anyway, the thing about this is, though, America has gone through these periods before, and I think a lot of the Salem witch trials, these periods of philosophical hysteria. And usually, every time before now, a kind of common sense has risen up from the bottom, almost always, has risen up from the bottom, and the cloud of hysteria, the cloud of philosophical nonsense has been dispelled. Sometimes just the threat from overseas has dispelled the nonsense. The 20s, with their craziness, the roaring 20s disappeared into the Depression, and the Depression disappeared into the World War. And when we came out of World War, we were a stronger, healthier country. Even now, though, as the woke empire is striking back and going after our children in the schools, and these evil teachers' unions, which should be illegal, are just declaring that, no, you don't have the right to teach your kids. We will teach your kids. At the same time, in New Hampshire, Republican lawmakers approved education freedom accounts, which students can use toward expenses as private school tuition. In Pennsylvania, Democratic Governor Tom Wolf signed a budget that includes an expansion of high-demand state tax credit scholarship programs that allow people to choose more schools. Ohio lawmakers packaged several school choice provisions into their budget. In Arizona, the legislature raised the funding cap for special needs. The fight is not over. In fact, the fight is on.